Faceless men. Are they related to shadow people? What do they want? Just standing there, silent, motionless. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and don't forget to look behind you. At least you have eyes. The Faceless, too. A while ago, I posted my friend's encounter with a faceless being. Something similar happened to my wife. Needless to say, she was quite uncomfortable talking about it. She and her girlfriend, when they were teenagers, were riding around 1 a.m. in a residential area near Georgetown, VA. Turning a corner, they spied a utility truck parked next to the road. A man, presumably the utility worker, was seen clearly in a floodlight in front of the house the truck was parked in front of. My wife claims that at this point, time seemed to slow down, and she had indelibly ingrained on her memory Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me, which was playing on the radio at the time. That song still freaks her out 20-some years later. Both she and her girlfriend could clearly see the man, who appeared to be looking into the house. When the man turned and looked at my future wife, she could see that he had no face. Unlike the Minnesota encounter, this man had a gaping black hole where his face should have been. My wife recalled the sensation that this being was looking directly at her, and that this he or it was not merely strange, but evil. They took off as quickly as they could and never looked back. It was also the summer that she found a strange coin, a quarter, that felt vaguely electric when held. But that's another story. Man in the brown suit. I was 16 years old and never a believer of the paranormal until I experienced something myself. It was 8 a.m. and I was getting ready for school. My sisters were across the street at my uncle's house visiting my cousins. The apartment was very quiet, very still. I got my clothes out of my closet, moved towards the window to look outside. I had a feeling that someone was watching me, and a cold chill went up my back. I turned around and saw a faceless man wearing a brown suit and a fancy brown hat. I was so terrified, I could barely let out a gasp. He was standing straight up, very broad shoulders, just looking at me. Still in shock, I ran through him and down the hallway, escaping to the living room. I was so shook up, I called my sister and could just say, "Come home now." I told her my story, and she said she heard footsteps, cabinets opening, closing by themselves, etc. For a month straight, I couldn't sleep at all. Kept hearing these footsteps, sounding like people walking around our kitchen late at night. We moved a month later, but I'll never forget how eerie the man looked. No face, a full brown suit, fancy brown hat, and he was just floating. I told my mom about it that night, and she told me I was just seeing things. The eerie thing about it was, one of our old landlords committed suicide weeks before in his apartment, and he always wore a brown suit, my mom said. Since then, I have never seen a full apparition like that. I have many more experiences since then that I hope to share with all of you in the future. I would love to see feedback on what you all think. The Faceless Man in the Mountains. This next event is one that I'm putting on the site for a friend, as he would love to know if anyone has an opinion about it, or can explain it. Any comments are welcome. I am telling it from his perspective. This happened about 18 years ago. A friend and I were going to a new nightclub up in the Dublin Mountains. For any of you who are familiar with the Dublin Mountains, you'll know that up there at nighttime, there is a color blacker than black. So we were on our way up, and we must have taken a wrong turn, and after 45 minutes, we decided that we were lost. Over in the distance, there was someone sitting on a gate into a field. We decided to go over and ask him. As we grew closer, we saw that the figure was only short, and it seemed to be rocking back and forth really fast, like it was demented. We stopped and stared for a minute, and we realized that there was something freaky going on, as it was pitch black, and we could see the figure had a glow around it, but there were no street lamps or lights around. We also noticed that when we got closer, the figure appeared to have no face. It was like a mannequin face. We then looked around us, and we saw the trees blowing furiously, but there was no sound at all. You could have heard a pin drop. We knew we had to get out of there as soon as possible, so we began to jog backwards as to not take our eyes off the figure. After about 10 minutes or so, we heard a swoosh, and we heard the trees again blowing, and we knew that we were safe. We eventually found the nightclub, and the rest of the evening was normal. I still can't explain that night, but what I do know is that whatever the being was, it was not good. If anyone has experienced the same thing or has a theory behind it, please let me know. All comments are checked daily and replied to. Thanks for reading my story. Childhood. I can confirm your paranormal experience. It happened to me long time ago, when I was still a kid, about 5 years old. My grandma used to take me to kindergarten from my apartment each morning, and I remember for a short period of time, for about 1 week or so, I had a man in a totally red suit, almost like Spider-Man red, follow me each day to and from kindergarten. The weird thing was, my grandma never really noticed him. He was only 12 feet away. I remember the last moment I saw him. He stood there in front of me and my grandma, facing us. While my grandma was trying to open the door to my apartment, he stood there and stared at me and didn't move at all. That was when I realized that he was faceless. No mouth, no nose, no eyes, and no ears. I was way too young to be scared and didn't know what to do at all. All I remember was that as soon as my grandma opened the door, I ran in and shut it. I never saw him again. Now that I'm in my 30s, each time I think about it, I still think it's creepy.